Getting rich quick is a modern obsession, and for that very reason, it's the surest path to going broke. The more you chase financial shortcuts, the further you drift from what truly builds wealth. There's a silent mistake that drains money, energy, and mental clarity every single month. It doesn't show up as a big failure, but as small, repeated decisions that seem harmless until they come at too high a cost. This video isn't about earning more. It's about stopping the losses. It's about understanding why simply staying in the financial game long enough matters more than any flashy move that promises quick results. In today's video, you'll discover the mindset that separates those who build wealth from those constantly putting out financial fires. Stick around until the end, because real change begins when you learn to make fewer mistakes, and almost no one is ready for that. 1. Munger's radical philosophy against the get-rich shortcut. Most people believe getting rich means finding some secret play, something no one else has seen, a quick move that solves years of financial frustration all at once. Charlie Munger saw that as a fundamental thinking error, almost childish, because people who think that way are already operating out of anxiety, not logic. He wasn't trying to look brilliant or impress anyone with sophisticated ideas or bold bets that earned short-term applause. His focus was much simpler, and precisely because of that, far more powerful, consistently avoiding obviously stupid decisions over time. That one principle, when applied with discipline, already puts anyone ahead of more than 90% of those chasing get-rich-quick schemes. Here's something most people don't like to face honestly. Most people aren't broke because they lacked opportunity, but because they stacked up predictable mistakes that could have been avoided with basic self-control. Expensive debt taken on for status, speculation done out of boredom, financial decisions made to soothe emotional insecurity rather than to build wealth. Munger would say that before you think about making more money, you need to stop the slow bleed happening every month. Wealth begins the moment you break the cycle of stupid losses that drain your mental and financial energy. There's a seductive narrative being sold all the time, the idea that the game is about winning big, hitting it right, multiplying fast. But the financial elite play a different game, one almost no one notices because it doesn't create immediate dopamine. The real game isn't making a lot, it's not losing most of what you already have through impulsive, poorly thought out decisions. Once you understand this, your relationship with money shifts from emotional to strategic. You stop chasing excitement and start seeking stability, margin for error, and consistency. That mental shift creates something rare, calm in the middle of chaos. While most people react to the market, the news, and other people's success stories, you start operating with less noise and more clarity. The anxiety fades because you're no longer trying to prove anything to anyone or make up for past frustrations with big bets. Your focus shifts from comparison to control, something the truly wealthy value far more than any fast return. That calm isn't passivity, it's strategic self-control. Notice the stark contrast here. While many want to seem smart talking about complex investments, the elite are quietly eliminating obvious risks anyone rational can spot. They cut excess, reduce unnecessary variables, and build a solid foundation before thinking about growth. That may seem boring to those hooked on financial thrills, but it's exactly what creates long-term advantage. Money respects those who know how to survive before they try to accelerate. If you take only one lesson from this point, let it be this. Real wealth doesn't begin with genius. It begins with silent, repetitive discipline applied to simple decisions. Avoiding big mistakes creates room for average decisions to work surprisingly well over time. That's Munger's philosophy in its rawest, most honest form. Not being consistently stupid is, in itself, a massive advantage. 2. Plan B. Survive and build capital first. There's an unglamorous truth about money that almost no one wants to hear, especially when they're broke or starting from scratch. Before you invest well, before you talk about financial freedom or passive income, there's a critical phase called conscious financial survival. Charlie Munger always made it clear that the real game begins long before you start making real money. The hardest part isn't multiplying capital, it's staying alive until you reach the point where capital can finally start working for you. Ignoring this phase turns any financial strategy into an emotional gamble disguised as a plan. Most people fail because they try to run before they can even stand on their own financially. They want to invest without stability, take risks without a cushion, chase returns while living under constant pressure. Munger saw this not as a lack of intelligence, but as a flaw in logical sequencing. First you stabilize, then you build, and only then do you think about accelerating. When that order is flipped, the outcome is usually the same: frustration, losses, and ending up right back where you started, only with less energy than before. Plan B isn't about giving up, it's about making sure you don't crash before you succeed. This plan starts with simple, but emotionally tough decisions for most people. Paying off expensive debt comes before any talk of investments or opportunities. Building an emergency fund isn't a lack of ambition, it's respect for your own future and your own nervous system. Creating seed capital requires small, clear, and realistic goals, not vague promises that fade after a few weeks. This kind of structure protects you from making decisions based on impulse, fear, or social comparison. There's also a silent battle happening in your mind as you try to build this foundation. Instant gratification is a powerful addiction, especially when money shows up as emotional relief. Every impulsive purchase gives you short-term pleasure, but charges high interest over the long run, financially and psychologically. Reconditioning your mind to accept delayed rewards takes repetition and daily self-control. This is where many people quit, not because they lack ability, but because they lack the emotional maturity to wait. When you accept this phase as a legitimate part of the process, something shifts deeply in your mindset. You stop feeling behind and start feeling strategic. Every dollar saved stops feeling like a sacrifice and starts to represent control, direction, and clear intent. The anxiety fades because you know exactly where you are and what needs to be done now, no fantasies. Clarity replaces comparison, and that completely transforms your relationship with money. Very few people have the patience to go through this initial stage with discipline, and that's exactly why it works. While most are chasing shortcuts, you're building quiet stability. While others bet everything on one idea, you're creating room for error without going broke. This kind of advantage doesn't show up quickly, but it dominates in the long run. Before you get rich, you learn how to survive well, and that changes everything. 3. Mental models. How to think like Munger when making decisions. Charlie Munger believed that most people think wrong before they act wrong. They start by asking, "How do I get rich?" when you should be asking something much more uncomfortable. The right question isn't about winning, it's about avoiding ruin. That mental shift completely changes the kind of decisions you make on a daily basis. Instead of chasing brilliant ideas, you start eliminating self-destructive behaviors. For Munger, thinking well was always more about avoiding mistakes than about pursuing brilliance. The most powerful mental model he used is called inversion, and it's brutally simple. Instead of asking how to achieve a positive result, you ask what guarantees failure, and you cut that out without mercy. In finance, that means identifying everything that could destroy your capital before trying to grow it. Impulsive spending, unnecessary leverage, betting on things you don't understand, decisions driven by fear or euphoria. Once those factors are removed, growth stops being a mystery and starts becoming a consequence. This model can be applied in a practical and immediate way, with zero intellectual sophistication. Grab a pen and paper and write down 5 behaviors that, if repeated, could financially ruin you. Don't think in extremes. Think about common, socially accepted habits. Recurring consumer debt, investing based on tips, increasing your lifestyle without increasing your income, lack of savings, emotional dependence on money. Eliminating those puts you in a statistically stronger position than most people. What's most interesting is the psychological impact of this approach. When you stop trying to hit the big score, your mind becomes more stable. Anxiety decreases because you're no longer trying to predict the future or compete with other people's success stories. You begin to operate with less noise and more clarity. That increases your confidence because your decisions stop being reactive. Control becomes the core of your strategy again. This process also requires an honest review of your automatic beliefs about money. The idea that high risk always brings high reward is one of the most dangerous out there. In practice, high risk usually brings high volatility, and excessive volatility breaks people before it makes them rich. Munger understood that real wealth comes from prolonged survival in the game. The longer you stay in one piece, the greater your chances of winning. Few people have the mental discipline to think this way because this model doesn't feed the ego. It won't make you sound smart in conversations, and it won't give you thrilling stories to tell. But it builds something far more valuable: solid decisions repeated over time. Thinking like Munger isn't about knowing more, it's about making fewer mistakes. And in the real world, that makes all the difference. 4. Circle of competence. Focus on what you truly understand. Charlie Munger was relentless about a mistake that destroys more wealth than economic crises. Investing in something you don't deeply understand isn't boldness, it's intellectual negligence. The concept of a circle of competence comes from that brutal clarity. You don't need to know everything about the financial world to build wealth. You just need to know a few things very well and respect what's outside your reach. Most people lose money not because of a lack of opportunity, but because of overconfidence in areas they don't truly grasp. There's a huge difference between curiosity and competence, and very few people draw that line honestly. Reading an article, watching a video, or listening to someone articulate an idea doesn't create real understanding. Munger believed you should only invest in what you can explain clearly, without jargon or beating around the bush. If you can explain why something creates value, where the return comes from, and what the real risks are, then you're outside your circle. And outside the circle, the probability of error grows exponentially. Applying this concept requires humility, something rare when money is involved. A simple exercise reveals a lot. List the financial areas you truly understand well enough to explain in 1 minute without sounding unsure. Then list the ones where you're just repeating arguments you've heard from others. That difference separates investors from gamblers. Intellectual clarity doesn't guarantee immediate profits, but it drastically reduces the odds of making stupid losses. The problem is that the environment constantly pushes you outside your circle. Trends, fads, stories of quick wins, and the feeling that everyone else is getting ahead except you create psychological pressure. Munger deliberately ignored this noise. He would rather miss out on an opportunity than lose money in something he didn't understand. That mindset might seem conservative to people who chase excitement, but in the long run, it's extremely aggressive. There's a quiet power in saying, "I don't know," or "this isn't for me right now." Contrary to what's often sold out there, you don't need to be in every market to thrive. Focus creates strength. Scattered attention creates fragility. The narrower and deeper your circle of competence, the sharper your decisions become. That reduces anxiety, increases confidence, and improves consistency. At the end of the day, respecting your circle is an act of personal leadership. You stop following the crowd and start following your own clarity. Rejecting investments you can't explain in under a minute isn't a limitation, it's a strategy. Most people get lost trying to chase everything. The elite win by choosing little and understanding deeply. This is one of the most underrated filters of real wealth. 5. Patience. Why real money comes in the waiting. Most people underestimate how much impatience destroys financial results over a lifetime. They don't just lose money because of bad decisions, they lose because they can't wait long enough for a good decision to mature. Charlie Munger and Warren Buffett built extraordinary results by doing something most people find boring, sitting on an investment for years. It wasn't a lack of opportunity, it was a deep respect for time as an ally. Real money rarely comes from constant action, but from the right decision held for long enough. There's a modern addiction to movement that confuses activity with progress. Buying and selling all the time creates the illusion of control, when in reality, it leads to mental exhaustion and repeated mistakes. Munger understood that every decision has a hidden cost called attention. The more you fiddle, the more you expose yourself to error. Waiting isn't passivity, it's discipline applied over time. Most people lose because they can't handle the silence between a decision and its result. Applying patience requires structure, not willpower. Setting clear timeframes to review investments protects you from daily impulses. Instead of checking prices every day, you set reviews every 6 months, a year, or more, depending on the asset. This drastically reduces emotional decisions triggered by short-term noise. The focus shifts away from volatility and toward fundamentals. That simple change already puts you in a different league. The short term will always try to provoke a reaction. News, temporary dips, other people's comments, and constant comparisons all create psychological pressure. Munger trained his mind to turn those interruptions into information, not emotional triggers. Not every discomfort calls for action. Often, the best move is to do nothing and let time work. That skill is rare because it demands self-control and confidence in your own process. There's also an overlooked psychological benefit to patience. When you accept that real results take time, your anxiety drops. You stop measuring success by days or weeks and start thinking in longer cycles. That brings clarity, emotional stability, and consistency in your decisions. Your mind stops chasing instant validation, and that calm directly improves the quality of your financial choices. In the end, patience isn't about waiting blindly, it's about waiting with conviction. It's knowing why you made a decision and giving it the time it needs to prove itself. Most people crave fast action because they don't trust their own judgment. Those who trust wait. And those who wait with logic and discipline usually get results that look like luck to outside observers. Money respects those who understand the value of time. 6. Avoid blind diversification as a strategic plan. Diversification is often sold as an absolute rule, almost a financial commandment, but Munger consistently challenged that consensus. To him, excessive diversification wasn't a sign of intelligence, but often a way to protect oneself from ignorance. When someone doesn't understand anything deeply, they end up spreading money everywhere to ease their psychological discomfort. The problem is that this dilutes focus, dilutes returns, and masks poorly thought-out decisions. The financial elite don't diversify to feel safe. They concentrate when they know exactly what they're doing. Most people confuse safety with quantity. They believe that owning dozens or even hundreds of assets automatically reduces risk, when in reality, it often increases the lack of control. If you can't track, understand, and clearly explain why you own something, that asset becomes noise in your portfolio. Munger argued that a few well-understood investments are safer than many poorly studied ones. Risk isn't in concentration itself, it's in the lack of understanding. When there's clarity, concentration becomes an advantage. Applying this logic requires intellectual and emotional courage. Prioritizing a few high-conviction assets means accepting that you might be out of fashion or out of the popular conversation. While others talk a little about everything, you go deep into a few decisions. This creates positive asymmetry because your time and attention stop being scattered. The more focused you are, the better your decisions become. And better decisions tend to generate better long-term results. There's also a powerful psychological benefit to this approach. Fewer assets mean fewer stimuli, less anxiety, and less temptation to act unnecessarily. You start tracking fundamentals, not headlines. Your mind becomes more stable because you know exactly why you're invested. This drastically reduces impulsive decisions made during moments of volatility. Clarity replaces dispersion, and that changes everything. A simple tool helps apply this concept without becoming extreme. The 80-20 allocation rule suggests that the majority of your capital should be concentrated in the assets you've studied most and understand best. The rest can serve as learning or complementary diversification, but not as a central pillar. This forces you to be honest about where you truly have conviction. It's not about betting everything. It's about aligning your money with real understanding. In the end, avoiding blind diversification is an act of financial maturity. You stop using quantity as an emotional crutch and start using knowledge as your foundation. Most people prefer to spread their money because they're afraid of being wrong. The elite prefer to concentrate because they know exactly why they're there. When focus and clarity walk together, money starts working much more efficiently. And over the long run, that makes all the difference. 7. Continuous learning. How Munger turned knowledge into wealth. Charlie Munger believed that money is a consequence, not the starting point. For him, real competitive advantage came from the continuous accumulation of knowledge applied over time. While most people only study when they need to solve an immediate problem, Munger learned every single day as part of his identity. He didn't seek information to look smart. He did it to make better decisions. This quiet habit created a compounding effect as powerful as financial interest. There's a huge difference between consuming information and building understanding. Most people read passively, jump from one piece of content to the next, and rarely connect what they learn to real decisions. Munger did the opposite. He read slowly, reflected deeply, and integrated ideas from multiple disciplines. Psychology, economics, biology, history, and human behavior all intersected in his thinking. This broad mental model allowed him to see risks and opportunities before most. Knowledge, when well integrated, becomes a filter for decision-making. The concept of compounded knowledge is simple but requires rare discipline. Learning a little every day might seem irrelevant in the short term, but it builds up brutally over the years. Munger liked the idea of going to bed a little smarter than when he woke up. It wasn't about how many books you read, it was about the quality of your understanding. This pattern creates increasing clarity, while those who learn in a chaotic way remain confused. Clarity is a silent form of power. Turning learning into wealth requires a simple system, not willpower. Consistent reading, clear note-taking, and periodic review lead to real retention. Even more important is connecting each insight to real-world decisions, even small ones. If you learn something about risk, it should change the way you invest. If you learn about human behavior, it should influence how you respond emotionally to the market. Knowledge without application becomes intellectual entertainment. There's also a deep psychological impact to this process. When you learn consistently, your confidence stops depending on external validation. You begin to trust your own judgment more and rely less on other people's opinions. That reduces anxiety, fear of making mistakes, and the need to follow the crowd. Your mind becomes more stable because it knows it's evolving, even if the results haven't shown up yet. That stability supports better decisions. Few people have the patience for this path because it doesn't bring immediate applause. There's no quick feeling of victory, just quiet progress. But that's exactly why it works. While many are chasing the next miracle tip, you're building a solid intellectual foundation. Over time, that foundation turns into smarter decisions, fewer mistakes, and greater financial consistency. For Munger, wealth was always the inevitable byproduct of learning better than most. 8. Watch out for biases, how your mind sabotages you, and how to fix it. Charlie Munger understood something most people ignore their entire lives. The biggest threat to your money isn't the market, it's an untrained mind. He studied cognitive biases deeply because he knew that financial decisions are rarely purely rational. Fear, euphoria, social comparison, and the need to belong all distort judgment, often without us realizing it. And when money is involved, these mental shortcuts become even more dangerous. Ignoring them is like speeding down the highway with your eyes half closed. One of the most destructive biases is instant gratification. The mind prefers a small reward now over a much bigger one later, even when logic clearly favors waiting. Another common bias is social proof, that false sense of safety that comes when everyone else is doing it. There's also fear of missing out, which leads people to sell at the worst time or jump in late after the market is already overheated. Munger knew these impulses don't just vanish, they need to be identified and consciously managed. The financial elite don't trust their own minds without filters. That's why Munger advocated for simple systems to reduce emotional interference. One powerful tool is a decision journal, where you record why you made a specific financial choice. Over time, patterns become clear. Decisions driven by fear, urgency, or comparison begin to repeat. This kind of tracking creates self-awareness, something rare and incredibly valuable. You stop fooling yourself with convenient narratives. There's an important mental shift that few people make. Instead of assuming most people know what they're doing, you start from the opposite premise. The crowd tends to lose more than it wins, especially in competitive financial environments. Once you accept that, you stop seeking external validation for your decisions. Your focus shifts to avoiding big mistakes, not chasing trends. That inversion changes your entire posture. Correcting bias doesn't mean eliminating emotion. That's impossible. It means creating space between stimulus and response. When you feel a strong impulse, you learn to pause before acting. That pause is where the decision-making power of the elite lives. It allows logic to regain control so that choices are based on fundamentals, not fleeting feelings. The larger your capital, the more expensive any impulsive decision becomes. Over the long term, those who learn to identify and correct their own biases build an invisible edge. While others keep repeating the same mistakes with new excuses, you adjust your behavior. This evolution is quiet but incredibly effective. Munger didn't get rich by predicting the future. He got rich by avoiding predictable mental traps. And once you master that, you start playing a completely different game. 9 elite financial goals for those who are broke in 2026. When someone's broke, the biggest mistake isn't earning too little, it's thinking in a chaotic way. The mind switches into survival mode and starts reacting month to month instead of building for the year. Vague goals like, I want to make more money, don't create direction or control. The elite always start by defining clear, measurable, and emotionally neutral objectives. It's not about dreaming big, it's about structuring the next step with precision. The first real goal isn't investing or starting a business, it's building basic financial security. An emergency fund covering 3 to 6 months of expenses drastically reduces decisions made out of fear. Once that cushion exists, your mind shifts from panic mode to strategy mode. You stop accepting anything out of desperation. This foundation doesn't speed up gains, but it prevents costly mistakes. And at the beginning, that matters more than returns. The second milestone is both psychological and financial, saving your first $100,000. It doesn't matter if it takes years. What matters is the process you build on the way there. That goal teaches discipline, consistency, and lifestyle control. Every step forward reinforces your identity, not just your bank balance. Your mind starts seeing yourself as someone who builds, not just someone trying to survive. That shift completely transforms your future decision-making pattern. Only after that comes the third step, investing in simple, well-understood assets. No unnecessary complexity, no trends, no emotional bets. The focus here is alignment between understanding and capital allocation. The simpler the asset, the more likely you are to stick to the plan. Excess complexity is usually just a cover for lack of clarity. The elite start simple and only complicate when absolutely necessary. To sustain all of this, you need a practical system, not motivation. A personal financial SLA, service level agreement, creates clear limits for spending, contributions, and lifestyle. Adapting rules like 50/30/20 to the reality of someone just starting out brings control without suffocation. Money stops being chaotic and starts following predictable rules. Rules reduce emotional friction and increase consistency, and consistency beats intensity over the long run. Finally, there's a psychological detail that holds everything together, rewarding milestones, not impulses. Celebrating progress reduces anxiety and prevents abandonment of the plan. Each completed stage reinforces self-control and confidence. The elite don't wait to get rich to feel progress. They recognize it along the way. If you're broke in 2026, you don't need empty hope, you need clear structure. And structure turns chaos into growth.